I haven't been back to my hometown in 15 years. I can't go back. Physically, I know the roads are still there. I know the house is still standing on the edge of that dense pine forest in northern Minnesota. But mentally, I can't do it. Just seeing the name of the town on a map makes my chest tighten, like there's a hand squeezing my lungs, reminding me of the air that smelled like stale tobacco and wet wool. This happened when I was 16. We lived in a town called Oakhaven, one of those dying places where the main industry left in the 90s, and the population was mostly elderly folks and people too stubborn to leave. My parents were good people, but they were tired. My dad worked double shifts at the processing plant, and my mom was a nurse who worked nights. That meant I spent a lot of time alone in our farmhouse. It was a big, drafty place. 2 stories, peeling white paint, and a basement that always smelled like damp earth. We didn't have close neighbors. The nearest house was about a mile down the road, occupied by a widow, Mrs. Gable, who mostly kept to herself. It started in November. The snow had come early that year, blanketing the fields in a silence so heavy it felt like pressure in your ears. I was sitting in the living room, doing homework, when I heard it. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was faint, rhythmic. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall behind the TV. I froze, my pen hovering over my notebook. We had mice before. Field mice were a constant battle in the winter, but this sounded heavier, slower. I waited, holding my breath. Scritch, thud. A heavy thud, like something dropping. I stood up and walked to the wall, pressing my ear against the plaster. Silence, just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I laughed at myself, a nervous, dry sound. Rats, I muttered. Big, fat rats. When my dad got home the next morning, I told him. He was exhausted, eyes rimmed with red, dragging his boots off at the door. He nodded, rubbing his face. I'll set the traps in the attic this weekend, kiddo. Probably a raccoon trying to get warm. But he didn't check that weekend. He slept, and then he was called in for an extra shift, and the noises got worse. It wasn't just scratching anymore. It was movement. A week later, I was in the kitchen making a sandwich. It was around 7:00 p.m. Outside, it was pitch black. Our kitchen window faced the backyard, which led directly into the woods. I always hated that window at night because it turned into a black mirror. You couldn't see out, but anyone out there could see in perfectly. I was spreading mayo on bread when I felt it. You know that feeling? The primal prickle on the back of your neck that tells you, biologically, you are prey. I spun around, staring at the empty doorway to the hall. Nothing. Hello, I called out, my voice cracked. Silence. I turned back to my sandwich, my heart hammering a little. Then I heard a floorboard creak. It came from directly above me, my bedroom. I stopped breathing. I knew that creak. It was the loose board right in front of my closet. You had to step on it with weight to make it sound. A raccoon doesn't weigh enough to make a floorboard groan like that. I grabbed the landline. Cell reception was garbage out there, and dialed my mom's cell, straight to voicemail. She was probably in surgery or dealing with a patient. I dialed my dad. No answer. I grabbed a steak knife from the drawer. My hand was shaking so bad the blade clattered against the counter. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring up into the dark of the second floor. Who's there? I yelled. I called the police. They're on their way. A lie. I hadn't called them yet. In Oakhaven, the police was Sheriff Miller, who lived 30 minutes away and usually took an hour to respond to anything that wasn't a car accident. I waited 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then from upstairs, I heard a sound that made my blood turn to ice water. It was a cough, a wet, suppressed cough. I didn't play the hero. I didn't go up there. I ran. I bolted out the front door in my socks, sprinting through the snow to the pickup truck my dad left in the drive. I locked the doors and sat there, shivering, clutching that steak knife, staring at the house. I watched the windows. I waited to see a silhouette, a light, anything. But the house just sat there, dark and silent. When my dad finally came home 2 hours later, he found me half frozen in the truck. He was furious, not at me, but at the situation. He grabbed his shotgun and cleared the house room by room. He checked the closets, under the beds, the attic. Nothing. You must have heard the house settling, son, he said gently, pouring me a cup of hot cocoa later. Old houses make noises, and that cough. Well, fear plays tricks on the ears. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him, but I knew what I heard. Life went on, but the atmosphere in the house changed. It felt occupied. Things started going missing. Small things, a box of crackers from the pantry, a pair of my socks, my dad's spare lighter. My parents blamed me. Stop snacking so much, my mom would scold, and keep track of your laundry. I started sleeping with my door locked. I put a chair under the knob. Every night I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, listening. I could hear the breathing. I swear I could. It was soft, rhythmic, coming from the walls or maybe the attic hatch in the hallway. The breaking point, the night that ended my childhood, came 3 weeks later. It was a blizzard. The power had flickered and died around 8:00 p.m. My parents were both stuck at work. The roads were impassable. I was alone. I had lit candles in the living room and was huddled under a blanket, trying to read a book by flashlight. The wind was howling outside, battering the siding, making the whole house groan. It was the perfect cover for noise. I needed to use the bathroom. I took my flashlight and walked into the hallway. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. I did my business and washed my hands. As I dried them, I looked into the mirror. Behind me, in the reflection, the bathroom door was open. And in the hallway, illuminated by the faint spill of my flashlight beam, the attic hatch was open. The ladder was down. I stared at it in the mirror. My brain couldn't process it. That hatch was always padlocked. My dad kept the key on his ring. Then I saw the legs. Someone was climbing down the ladder. Bare, dirty feet, ragged gray sweatpants. I didn't scream. My throat seized up. I whipped around, slamming the bathroom door and locking it. It was a flimsy interior lock. You could pop it with a credit card. I backed against the far wall, sliding down into the bathtub, turning off my flashlight. I needed to be invisible. Thump it. The person landed on the floor. Shuffle, shuffle. Steps approaching the bathroom door. I clamped my hands over my mouth, tears streaming down my face. I was shaking so violently I thought my bones would rattle against the tub. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. Then a voice. It wasn't a growl or a shout. It was a whisper, high-pitched, almost childlike, but coming from a grown man. I know you're in there, little bird. I squeezed my eyes shut. Please go away, please go away. The doorknob rattled, gently at first, then harder. Come out and play. It's cold upstairs, it's so cold. He started pounding. Ram, 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 the wood splintered. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other side, that same wet, congested sound I had heard weeks ago. He was sick. He sounded like he was rotting from the inside out. Then abruptly, the pounding stopped. Silence. I waited. Had he gone? Was he waiting? Then I heard the scratching. He was scratching at the bottom of the door with his fingernails. I have your picture, he whispered. I watch you sleep. You look so peaceful. He slid something under the door. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. My flashlight beam hit it. It was a Polaroid. It was me, sleeping in my bed, taken from directly above, taken from the ceiling vent. I screamed. I couldn't hold it back anymore. I screamed until my throat tore. Whether it was my screaming that spooked him or the sound of a snowplow rumbling down the distant highway, I don't know. But I heard him run. Heavy, thudding footsteps retreating down the hall. The back door slammed. I stayed in that bathtub for 6 hours. I wet myself. I didn't care. I gripped that knife until my knuckles turned purple. When the sun came up and the storm broke, my parents finally made it home. They found me catatonic in the tub. The police came. This time they found evidence. In the attic, tucked away in the far corner behind layers of pink insulation, they found a nest. It was made of our old clothes, towels, and insulation. There were food wrappers, the missing crackers. There were bottles of urine. And the walls, the wooden beams of the attic were covered in carvings. They were names, my name, over and over again. and drawings, crude, charcoal sketches of me watching TV, me eating, me sleeping. They identified him a week later. It was a man named Elias Vance. He wasn't a drifter. He was the brother of Mrs. Gable, our neighbor down the road. Everyone thought he was in a mental institution in the state capital, but he had been released due to overcrowding 6 months prior. He hadn't gone back to his sister's house. He had come to ours. He had been living in our walls, in the crawl spaces, and in the attic for months. They never found him. He disappeared into the woods that morning and the snow covered his tracks. We moved a month later. We left the furniture, the clothes, everything. My dad couldn't look me in the eye for years. He felt he had failed to protect me. I'm 32 now. I live in a high-rise apartment in Chicago. I have 3 deadbolts on my door. I have cameras in every room. But sometimes when it's quiet and the wind howls off the lake, I still hear it. Scritch is gritch. And I wonder if he's still out there in the cold, looking for a new place to get warm. People ask me why I don't like bright lights. They ask why I keep my curtains drawn during the day and why I can't stand the sound of a door chime. You know, that electronic ding-dong sound when you walk into a shop. It's because of a job I had when I was 22. A job that taught me that light doesn't keep you safe. It just makes you easier to see. I was living in a town called Pinedale, West Virginia. It wasn't really a town. It was a collection of trailers, a post office, and a Baptist church clustered around a coal mine that had been shut down for a decade. I was desperate for cash, saving up to move to the coast, so I took the only job available, the graveyard shift at the Outcome gas station on Route 9. This gas station was isolated. It sat at mile marker 82, about 5 miles outside of town proper. Behind it was a steep, rocky hill covered in kudzu, and in front of it was the 2-lane highway and endless miles of dense forest. At night, it was like being in a spaceship. The fluorescent lights inside were blindingly bright, turning the floor-to-ceiling glass windows into black mirrors. I couldn't see anything outside, but everything outside could see me perfectly. The first month was boring, truly, painfully boring. My only customers were long-haul truckers fueled by caffeine and hate, or local teenagers trying to buy beer with fake IDs. I spent my nights reading paperbacks and mopping the same spot on the floor just to look busy. It changed on a Tuesday in October, 2:15 a.m. I was restocking the cigarettes behind the counter when the door chime went off. Ding dong. I turned around, putting on my customer service smile. Standing in the doorway was a man. He was tall, lanky tall, maybe 6'5", wearing a dirty brown Carhartt jacket and jeans that looked stiff with grease. He had a baseball cap pulled low, but I could see his face. He was pale, clean-shaven, and he was smiling, not a friendly smile. It was a tight, lipless expression, like he was clenching his teeth. He didn't walk to the coolers. He didn't go to the chips. He walked straight up to the counter and stood there, staring at me. "Help you with something?" I asked. He didn't blink. His eyes were a watery, pale blue. "Just looking," he said. His voice was wrong. You expect a guy looking like that to sound rough, maybe have a thick country drawl. But his voice was soft, high-pitched, and incredibly articulate. It sounded like a child trying to imitate an adult. "Okay," I said, shifting my weight. "Let me know if you need anything." He stood there for another full minute, just staring. He was looking at my name tag. Then he looked at my hands. Then he looked at the book I had left on the counter. "Stephen King," he murmured. "Do you like to be scared, David?" I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. "It's just a book, man." "I don't like books," he said. "I like real things." Then, without buying anything, he turned and walked out. I watched him go. He didn't get into a car. He walked around the side of the building, toward the dumpsters and the darkness of the hill. I waited for headlights to sweep across the lot, signaling he had driven away. They never came. He had walked into the woods. I locked the front door immediately. I spent the rest of the night standing in the corner where the cameras could see me, clutching a box cutter. He didn't come back for 3 nights. I convinced myself he was just some local weirdo, maybe a meth head from the trailer park down the road. But on Saturday night, the pattern started. Ding dong, 3:00 a.m. He walked in, same clothes, same tight smile. This time he bought a single pack of gum. "Do you live alone, David?" he asked as I rang him up. "That's none of your business," I said, trying to sound tough. My hands were shaking. "I bet you do," he whispered. "You look lonely, I'm lonely too." He placed the coins on the counter, deliberately touching my fingers with his cold, rough hand as he did. I pulled back like I'd been burned. "Get out," I snapped. He laughed a dry, wheezing sound and left. Again, no car. He walked into the dark. I called the sheriff the next morning. Sheriff Grady was a nice guy, but he was useless. "David, unless he threatens you or steals something, there ain't much I can do. It's a public business. He's allowed to buy gum." "He's watching me," I insisted. "He walks into the woods, he doesn't have a car. Probably parked down the road to save gas," Grady shrugged. "Just ignore him." 2 weeks went by. The man came in every other night, always between 2:00 and 3:00 a.m. He stopped buying things. He would just come in, stand by the magazine rack and watch me. He would hum a song, a low, discordant melody I didn't recognize. I started parking my car right in front of the doors, under the lights. I started carrying a tire iron in my backseat. The escalation happened on a rainy Tuesday. The storm was bad, thunder shaking the glass, rain lashing the pavement. The store was empty. I went to the back room to use the restroom. The back room was a narrow hallway with the manager's office, the storage closet, and the bathroom. There was a heavy steel door at the end of the hall that led to the back alley where the dumpsters were. That door was always double-locked from the inside. I came out of the bathroom and froze. The steel back door was unlocked. The deadbolt was turned, and the door was cracked open about an inch. Rain was spitting in, pooling on the concrete floor. My heart stopped. I knew I had checked that door at the start of my shift. I always did. I grabbed the handle to slam it shut, but something stopped me. On the floor, right in the puddle of rainwater, was a footprint, a muddy boot print, pointing into the hallway. Someone was inside. I backed away slowly, my breath hitching in my throat. I moved toward the main store area, my eyes scanning the shadows of the storage shelves. "Hello," I whispered. I burst out into the main store area expecting to see him standing there, but the store was empty. The chimes hadn't gone off. I ran to the counter and grabbed the phone to call 911. The line was dead. No dial tone, just static. Then I saw it. On the counter, right where I had been standing 10 minutes ago, was a Polaroid photo. It was wet. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was a photo of me, taken through the glass of the front window, but it wasn't from tonight. It was from a few nights ago. In the photo, I was mopping the floor, but it was the writing on the white border of the photo that made my knees buckle. In scratchy black marker, it read, "I like your blue sheets." I have blue sheets on my bed at home. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I went into survival mode. He wasn't just watching me here. He had been to my house. He had looked in my windows. I grabbed my car keys and ran for the front door. I didn't care about the job. I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to live. I pushed the glass door. It didn't budge. I pushed harder, locked. But how? It was a thumb-turn lock from the inside. I hadn't locked it. I looked closely at the handles. Someone had taken a heavy-duty bike lock, a U-lock, and threaded it through the handles from the outside. I was locked in, and he was inside with me. I spun around, putting my back against the glass. The store was a cage. The aisles of chips and candy created blind spots everywhere. "David," the voice came from the ceiling. I looked up the drop ceiling, the acoustic tiles. One of the tiles above the cooler section was shifted to the side. "Come play, David." The lights flickered once, twice, then total darkness. The power had been cut. The only light came from the lightning flashes outside, illuminating the store in strobe light bursts of blue-white terror. I heard him drop from the ceiling, a heavy thud on the linoleum near the soda machines. I ran. I scrambled over the counter, grabbing the tire iron I kept underneath it. I huddled in the corner behind the register, trapped. I could hear his boots squeaking on the floor. Squeak, step, squeak, step. He wasn't rushing, he was taking his time. "I brought you a present," he sang out. His voice was closer now. "Aisle 3. It's in the back room, go look." "Leave me alone," I screamed, swinging the tire iron blindly in the dark. "I have a gun." "Liar," he whispered. He was right on the other side of the counter. I could hear his breathing. Lightning flashed. For a split second, the store lit up. He was leaning over the counter. His face was inches from mine. He was wearing a mask now, a clear plastic mask, like a cheap Halloween decoration, but underneath it I could see his eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and ecstatic. He reached for me. I swung the tire iron with everything I had. Crack! I felt the metal connect with bone, his hand or his arm. He howled, a sound that wasn't human, more like a wounded animal. He recoiled, stumbling back into the chip rack, sending bags flying everywhere. I didn't wait. I scrambled up, jumped over the counter, and ran for the back hallway. I knew the back door was open. He had come in that way. I sprinted down the dark hall, slipping on the wet floor. I hit the back door with my shoulder, bursting out into the rain. I didn't stop. I ran through the mud, slipping and sliding, tearing my uniform on briars. I scrambled up the embankment to the highway. I waved my arms at the first set of headlights I saw. It was a semi-truck. The driver slammed on his brakes, blasting his horn, skidding to a halt inches from me. I collapsed on the asphalt, sobbing. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They cut the lock off the front doors. They searched the store with K9 units. They searched the woods. They found nothing. No man, no footprints leading away. But they found what he had left in the back room. In the manager's office, sitting on the desk, was a small, gift-wrapped box. Inside was a dead canary, and under the bird was a set of keys. My spare house keys, the ones I kept hidden under a rock on my porch. They never caught him. Sheriff Grady finally took it seriously, but there were no fingerprints. The security cameras, the hard drive had been removed. He had taken it. I quit that night. I moved out of my apartment the next day, breaking my lease. I moved 3 states away. I changed my name. But here is the part that keeps me awake at night. The part I've never told anyone. A few years ago, I was in a grocery store in Ohio. A completely different life. I was standing in the checkout line, minding my own business. Behind me, a man was buying a pack of gum. I didn't look at him, but as he paid, I heard him speak to the cashier. "Have a nice night," he said. The voice, soft, high-pitched, articulate. I froze. I couldn't turn around. I couldn't breathe. I waited until I heard his footsteps walk away. When I finally turned, the automatic doors were sliding shut. I ran to the window. I saw a figure walking across the parking lot. A tall, lanky man in a brown jacket. He stopped. He didn't turn around. He just raised a hand and gave a little wave. Then he got into a car, a rusted blue sedan, and drove away. He knows where I am. I don't know if he's waiting for the right moment or if he just enjoys the hunt. But every time I hear a door chime, every time I see a sudden flash of light, I see his face, and I remember the blue sheets. I've always been a rational person. I'm an architect by trade. My life is built on lines, measurements, and structural integrity. If something is wrong with a building, there is a reason. A load-bearing wall is weak. The foundation is settling. The materials are substandard. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in monsters. Or, at least, I didn't. 2 years ago, I bought a fixer-upper in a small town called Blackwood, up near the Washington state border. It was a beautiful property, 10 acres of dense Douglas firs, a creek, and a house that needed a lot of love but had good bones, as we say in the industry. The town itself was quaint, the kind of place where the general store still sold penny candy, and the sheriff was elected by a show of hands at the VFW hall. I moved in alone. My divorce had just been finalized, and I needed the project to keep my hands busy and my mind off the empty space in my bed. The property backed right up into national forest land. No fences, just my yard fading into the deep, ancient green of the woods. For the first 2 months, it was paradise. The trouble started with the smell. It was mid-July. I was working on the back deck, sanding down the railing when a breeze rolled down from the tree line. It smelled like copper and rot. Intense. Violent. I grabbed a shovel, thinking a deer had died nearby. I walked about 50 yards into the woods, following the scent. I found it. It was a deer, a doe, but it hadn't just died, it had been displayed. The animal was propped up against a tree, sitting on its hind legs like a human. Its front hooves were crossed politely over its chest. Its head was tilted back, staring up at the canopy. There was no blood on the ground. It had been killed somewhere else, drained, and then posed here. I felt a wave of nausea, not just from the smell, but from the intent. Animals kill for food. They tear, they shred, they don't pose. I called the local game warden. He came out, chewed on a toothpick, and looked at the carcass. He didn't look surprised. "Probably kids," he grunted, kicking the dirt. "High schoolers get bored out here, do weird stuff. I'll have the carcass removed." "Kids?" I asked, incredulous. "That thing weighs 150 pounds, and it's rigid. Rigor mortis set in. Someone wrestled a stiff corpse into a sitting position." He just shrugged. "City folks get spooked easy. Lock your doors if it makes you feel better, Mr. Evans." He left. I didn't feel better. I decided to install security measures. Not alarms. The nearest deputy was 40 minutes away, so an alarm was just a dinner bell. But cameras. I bought 4 high-end trail cameras. These weren't the cheap ones that snap a blurry photo every minute. These were motion-activated, night vision video recorders that sent feeds directly to a cloud server I could access on my laptop. I strapped them to trees forming a perimeter about 100 yards out from the house, facing away from the property, looking into the woods. I wanted to see who was coming in. For a week, nothing. Just wind blowing branches and the occasional raccoon. Then came the night of August 4th. I was in my study, reviewing the footage from the previous night while drinking coffee. I clicked on camera 3, which faced a dense thicket of ferns near the creek. The timestamp was 3:12 a.m. The video triggered. At first, all I saw was the grain of the night vision, the world rendered in shades of gray and black. Then, movement in the bottom left corner. A figure crawled into the frame. They were on all fours, moving slow, low to the ground. I leaned in, squinting. It looked like a person, but the movement was wrong. It was fluid, rolling the shoulders like a big cat. The figure stopped in the center of the frame. It slowly stood up. It was a man. He was naked, caked in mud or dirt from head to toe, which made him look gray in the night vision. He was emaciated, ribs showing clearly. His hair was long and matted. He stood there perfectly still, his back to the camera. He was staring toward my house. He stood there for the entire duration of the clip, 2 minutes. He didn't twitch. He didn't shift his weight. He was like a statue. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I clicked the next clip, 3:14 a.m. He was closer. He had moved 20 feet toward the house in the split second between recordings. I clicked the next, 3:16 a.m. Closer. I frantically clicked through the files. He was advancing on the house, but only when the camera wasn't recording. Every time the motion sensor triggered, he was frozen, staring. The last clip was from camera 1, the one closest to my back porch. 3:45 a.m. The camera is mounted on a pine tree, looking back at my yard. The man is there. He is standing directly under the deck. His face is pressed against the wooden lattice that skirts the crawlspace under my house. He's smiling, and he's holding something. I zoomed in. The resolution pixelated, but I could make it out. He was holding an architectural blueprint. My blueprint. The one I kept on the drafting table in my study. I slammed the laptop shut. I grabbed my keys and my phone. I didn't pack a bag. I just needed to get to the police station. I ran to the front door, threw it open, and stopped dead. My car, my SUV, parked in the gravel driveway. Every single tire was slashed. The windshield was smashed in, and sitting on the hood perfectly centered was a dead rabbit, posed, sitting up, paws crossed. I was trapped. I ran back inside and bolted the door. I checked the windows. Locked. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I owned. I pulled up the live feed on my laptop. It was 10:00 a.m. now, broad daylight. The woods looked peaceful, dappled with sunlight. I checked camera 1, empty. I checked camera 2, empty. Then I checked camera 4. This camera was mounted high up on a tree, facing the side of my house where the master bedroom was. My heart stopped. The camera had been moved. It wasn't facing the woods anymore. Someone had climbed the tree and twisted it. It was pointing directly into my bedroom window. And inside the bedroom on the live feed, I saw him. The mud-caked man. He was in my room right now. He was standing by my bed. He was holding my pillow. He brought it to his face and inhaled deeply, his eyes closing in ecstasy. I was downstairs in the kitchen. He was directly above me. I heard the floorboards creak overhead. The same creak I heard every morning when I got out of bed. He wasn't just intruding, he was mimicking me. He walked to the bathroom. I heard the faucet turn on. I realized with a jolt of horror that the plumbing issues I'd been hearing for weeks, the water running, the toilets flushing when I wasn't there, weren't old pipes. He had been in the house with me for days, maybe weeks, hiding in the crawlspace, coming out when I worked in the yard. I didn't confront him. I'm not a fighter. I quietly unlocked the back door. I slipped out in my socks so I wouldn't make noise on the gravel. I ran down the driveway, past my ruined car, and onto the main road. I sprinted 2 miles until a logging truck stopped for me. The driver saw the knife in my hand and my wild eyes, but he let me in anyway. When the state police raided the house 3 hours later, the man was gone, but they found where he had been living. Under the house in the crawlspace, he had built a replica of my life. He had stolen my old clothes. He had taken trash from my bin, empty coffee cups, food wrappers. He had arranged them in the dirt to mirror the layout of my furniture upstairs. He had a bed made of my stolen insulation directly underneath my real bed. He slept when I slept. He woke when I woke. But the worst part, the thing that made the lead investigator vomit, they found a hole drilled through the floorboards, right under my shower, and another one under my toilet. He had been watching, collecting. They never found him. The woods are too deep, and the caves go on for miles. I sold the house at a loss to a developer who bulldozed it. But sometimes, when I'm in a crowd or at a grocery store, I catch a scent, a faint whiff of wet earth and copper, and I see someone standing a little too still, watching me with eyes that know exactly what I look like when I sleep. I live in the city now, on the 20th floor, but I still check under the bed every single night, because I know he's not a ghost, he's flesh and blood, and he knows my scent. We always assume that horror is ugly. We think it's dark alleys, rotted wood, and screaming faces. But I'm here to tell you that true horror can be beautiful. It can wear a floral apron, smell like freshly baked apple pie, and have a smile so bright it blinds you to the knife hidden behind its back. 3 years ago, I needed an escape. I was coming out of an abusive relationship in the city, my nerves shot, my bank account drained. I wanted somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, where nobody knew my name and the loudest noise was the chirping of crickets. I found a listing for a small rental cottage in a town called Harmony Creek, nestled deep in a valley in upstate New York. The pictures looked idyllic. White picket fences, mature oak trees lining the streets, a gazebo in the town square. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but the landlord, a sweet old man on the phone, said they were just looking for the right kind of person to join their community. When I arrived on a sunny Tuesday in June, it was even more perfect than the photos. There was no litter, not a single candy wrapper or cigarette butt on the sidewalks. Every lawn was manicured to the exact same height, a vibrant, unnatural green. The houses were all painted in complementary pastel colors. It felt like driving into a postcard from the 1950s. Before I had even finished unpacking my first box, the doorbell rang. Standing there was my next-door neighbor, Beverly. She was a woman in her late 50s, with hair sprayed into an immobile blonde helmet and a smile that showed far too many teeth. She was holding a casserole dish wrapped in gingham. "Welcome home, dear," she beamed. Her voice was high and breathy, like she was talking to a toddler. "We are just so thrilled to have you. We've been watching that little cottage, hoping for a nice young lady to move in." It was sweet, overwhelmingly sweet. Within an hour, 5 other neighbors had dropped by, each with food, pies, salads, roasts. My small kitchen counter was groaning under the weight of their generosity. They all asked the same questions, their eyes wide and unblinking. "Are you alone, dear? No husband, no children, just you?" When I confirmed I was alone, their smiles seemed to stretch wider. "Perfect," Beverly had said, patting my hand a little too hard. "We'll take care of you. We're all family here." For the first 2 weeks, I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach. I told myself I was just cynical from city life. This was what nice people did. But the perfection started to grate on me. It was relentless. Every morning at 7:00 a.m. sharp, I would hear the synchronized roar of lawnmowers starting up all over the neighborhood. By 8:00 a.m., they all stopped at once. If I left a coffee cup on my front porch railing for more than 10 minutes, Beverly would appear at the fence. "Clara, honey," she'd call out, her smile never wavering. "Everything has its place. We don't want to invite clutter, do we? Clutter in the home leads to clutter in the mind." She wouldn't leave until I took the cup inside. I started to notice other things. There were no dogs in Harmony Creek, no cats, no outdoor pets at all. When I asked the mailman about it, his friendly demeanor instantly vanished. His face went blank. "Pets are unpredictable," he said flatly. "Harmony requires predictability." The horror didn't creep up on me. It was slowly suffocating me with kindness. I felt like I was living in a dollhouse where an unseen hand was constantly rearranging me if I stepped out of line. The turning point happened in my second month. There was a house down the street that had been empty since I arrived, the only house with a "for sale" sign. One afternoon, a moving truck appeared. A young family, a mom, dad, and 2 loud, energetic little boys, started unloading bikes and toys onto the lawn. They were messy, they were loud, they were normal. The atmosphere in the town changed instantly. It was subtle, like the barometric pressure dropping before a tornado. The neighbors didn't bring them casseroles. Instead, I saw them standing in their own windows, behind lace curtains, just watching the new family. That night around 2:00 a.m. I woke up. I don't know what woke me. It wasn't a noise, it was the absence of noise. The usual night sounds, the wind, the crickets, had stopped. I crept to my living room window and peered through the blinds. The streetlights were off. The whole town was plunged into darkness, except for the new family's house down the road. And standing on their lawn were the neighbors. All of them: Beverly, the mailman, the sweet old landlord, and dozens of others I recognized. They were just standing there in the dark, shoulder to shoulder, forming a silent human wall around the property. They weren't moving. They weren't speaking. They were just staring at the house. The family inside must have seen them. I saw the living room curtains twitch. I saw a light flick on, then off quickly. I watched for an hour, terrified to breathe, terrified that if I made a sound, all those heads would snap toward my house. Eventually, just before dawn, they silently dispersed, melting back into their perfect pastel homes like ghosts. The next morning, the moving truck was back. The family was packing up. They looked shattered. The mother was crying openly as she threw toys into the back of a sedan. They left before noon. By 1:00 p.m., Beverly was on that lawn, raking away the footprints they had left behind, restoring the perfect green carpet. I knew then that I had to get out. This wasn't a quirky town. This was a hive. I started planning my escape. I knew I couldn't just load up my car during the day. They were always watching. Beverly knew when I went to the bathroom. She certainly knew when I was packing a box. I decided to leave at night, take only what I could carry, and just drive. 3 nights later at midnight, I had my go bag packed. I had my keys in my hand. I reached for the doorknob of my front door. Ding dong. My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze, I didn't breathe. Ding dong, ding dong. Clara, dear. It was Beverly. Her voice wasn't high and breathy anymore. It was flat, cold. We know you're awake, Clara. We saw the light change under the door crack. It's very late for a young lady to be up. I backed away from the door. I ran to the back door in the kitchen, the one leading to the small garden. I tried the handle. Locked. I fumbled with the deadbolt, but it wouldn't turn. It was jammed from the outside. I ran to the windows. I tried to slide them up. They were painted shut, all of them. They hadn't been painted shut yesterday. Someone had done this today while I was at the grocery store. Ding dong. The ringing became continuous, a manic, endless chime echoing through the small house. Then other voices joined in. Open the door, Clara. We just want to talk. Harmony requires predictability, Clara. Don't be difficult, dear. It's rude. They were all out there. I could feel them pressing against the house. I could hear palms sliding against the siding, testing for weaknesses. I ran to the basement door. It was my only option. The basement had those small, ground-level windows. Maybe I could break one. I threw open the basement door and stumbled down the dark stairs, fumbling for the light switch. I flipped the switch. The basement wasn't empty. Sitting on a folding chair, in the center of the concrete floor, was Beverly. She must have come in through the bulkhead doors before they jammed the rest of the house. She was wearing her floral apron. Her hair was perfect. She looked up at me and her smile was gone. Her face was a mask of pure, terrifying neutrality. We're very disappointed in you, Clara, she said softly. You were doing so well. Your lawn edges were almost acceptable. Behind her, in the shadows of the basement, I saw others. The mailman was holding a roll of heavy-duty duct tape. The landlord was holding a pair of hedge clippers. We tried kindness, Beverly sighed, standing up slowly. But some people just refuse to fit the mold. Some people need to be pruned. She took a step toward me. I didn't think. I reacted with pure adrenaline. I grabbed the heavy glass jar of artisanal peaches sitting on the shelf next to me, one of the welcome gifts, and hurled it at her head. It connected with a sickening crunch. Beverly dropped without a sound. The others froze for a second, stunned that their perfect order had been violently disrupted. That second was all I needed. I turned and scrambled back up the stairs on all fours. I heard them shouting behind me, heard heavy footsteps charging up the wooden steps. I burst into the kitchen and grabbed a dining chair. I smashed it through the back window, glass exploding outward. I dived through the jagged opening, tearing my clothes, slicing my arms, tumbling onto the grass outside. I didn't look back. I ran to my car. Thank God I hadn't packed it. They hadn't thought to disable it yet. I sped out of Harmony Creek doing 80 miles an hour, tires screeching through the silent, perfect streets. In my rearview mirror, I saw porch lights flicking on, one by one, as the hive woke up to chase the intruder. I live in the biggest, dirtiest city I could find now. I love the noise. I love the graffiti. I love that my neighbors scream at each other and ignore me. Sometimes I get packages in the mail with no return address. They're always perfectly wrapped in pastel paper. Inside, it's always something small. A single, perfect artificial flower, a tube of high-end toothpaste, a reminder to stay tidy. I burn them, but I can never wash the smell of apple pie and fear off my hands. They are still out there in their perfect valley, smiling their terrible smiles, waiting for the next person who needs a fresh start. I don't look at missing persons posters anymore. I can't. If I see a face on a milk carton or a flyer stapled to a telephone pole, I have to look away. If I stare too long, I start to see her face. And if I see her face, I hear the banging. That metallic, hollow banging that echoed across the wheat fields at 3 in the morning. This happened 4 years ago. I was 26, a landscape photographer trying to build a portfolio. I wanted to capture the dying American heartland, or some pretentious nonsense like that. I wanted rusted tractors, collapsing barns, and golden light filtering through dust. I found the perfect spot in a town called Oakhurst, Nebraska. It was barely a dot on the map, just a grid of dirt roads slicing through endless oceans of corn and soy. I rented a guest cottage on a working farm owned by a couple in their 60s, Silas and Martha Higgins. They were the salt of the earth. That's what everyone said. Silas was a man of few words, with hands like leather mitts and a back permanently stooped from labor. Martha was round, soft, and smelled like yeast and lavender. They treated me like a grandson. Martha would leave fresh biscuits on my porch. Silas would fix my car when the alternator acted up and refused to take a dime. "Just don't go near the old grain silo behind the North Ridge," Silas told me on the first day. He pointed a crooked finger toward a rusted metal tower jutting out of the corn about a quarter-mile away. "Structures rot. Steps are rusted through. Had a drifter kid break a leg out there 10 years back. I don't need the insurance headache." "Understood," I said. It seemed reasonable. For the first month it was paradise. The silence out there was profound. The sunsets were like fire. I got some of the best shots of my life. But silence in the country isn't really silence. You learn to pick apart the layers of sound. The wind in the corn sounds like whispering static. The coyotes yip like laughing children. And sometimes the metal groans. It started in late August. The heat broke and the nights got cool. I was sitting on my porch, editing photos on my laptop when I heard it. Clang! It was a sharp, resonant sound, metal on metal. I looked up. The sound had come from the direction of the silo. I waited. A minute passed. Clang, clang. Rhythmic, deliberate. "Wind," I whispered to myself. A loose sheet of metal flapping in the breeze. But there was no wind that night. The air was dead still. The corn stalks were frozen statues. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The sound continued for an hour, then stopped. The next morning, I was in the kitchen with Martha, drinking coffee. She was kneading dough, her arms floured to the elbows. "Heard some noise last night," I said casually. From the silo, sounded like someone hammering. Martha didn't stop kneading. She didn't look up. But the rhythm of her hands faltered for a split second, a tiny hesitation. "Raccoons," she said. Her voice was steady, sweet. "They get inside the empty drum. They knock rocks around, makes a terrible racket. Silas needs to seal it up better." "Makes sense," I lied. It didn't make sense. Raccoons scratch and scuffle. They don't strike metal with the force of a hammer. 2 nights later, I saw the light. I had woken up to use the bathroom around 2:00 a.m. I glanced out the window that faced the North Ridge. A single flashlight beam was bobbing through the corn. It was moving away from the farmhouse, heading toward the silo. I watched, hidden behind the curtains. The light reached the base of the silo and vanished inside. 10 minutes passed. Then the light reappeared, heading back to the house. It was Silas. I recognized his limp. He was carrying a bucket. Why was he feeding raccoons at 2:00 a.m.? The curiosity gnawed at me. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a gut feeling, a primal warning that the picture-perfect farmhouse was a facade. I waited for a day when they both went into town for Sunday service. They usually spent 3 hours there, church, then brunch at the diner. As soon as their truck kicked up dust down the driveway, I grabbed my camera bag and sprinted into the corn. The stalks were high, 7 feet tall, creating a green tunnel that blocked out the world. I ran until my chest burned, the rusted peak of the silo guiding me like a lighthouse. When I broke through the corn clearing, the silo loomed over me. It was ancient, the metal scaling off in orange flakes. There was a heavy iron door at the base. It was padlocked, a shiny new master lock that looked starkly out of place against the rusted hasp. I put my ear to the cold metal of the door. "Hello," I whispered. Silence. Then a shuffle, a soft dragging sound from inside. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Is someone in there?" A voice came back. It was faint, hoarse, and sounded terrified. "Water." It was a woman's voice. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. "Who are you? I'm going to get help. I'm going to." "No," she hissed. "Don't go, he'll come back, please, the lock." I looked around frantically. I grabbed a large rock from the ground and smashed it against the padlock. Clang! It didn't budge. I hit it again. And again. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the rock on my foot. "I can't open it," I yelled. "I'm going to call the police, just hang on." "They know," she wept. "The sheriff knows, don't call him, please just get me out." The sheriff knows. That froze me. Sheriff Brody was Silas's poker buddy. They hunted together every November. I realized then how alone I was. I was 5 miles from the nearest neighbor. The town was 20 miles away, and the people I was renting from, the sweet old couple baking biscuits, were monsters. I heard a sound behind me, the crunch of dry dirt. I spun around. Silas was standing at the edge of the corn clearing. He wasn't at church. He was holding a shotgun, not aimed at me but held loosely in the crook of his arm. He looked sad, disappointed. "I told you not to come out here, son," Silas said. His voice wasn't angry, it was tired. "Why didn't you listen?" "Silas," I stammered, backing up until my spine hit the silo door. "There's a woman in there. Who is she?" Silas sighed, scratching his chin. "She's sick, very sick. She's a distant cousin, troubled mind, dangerous to herself. We keep her safe here. The hospitals, they just drug 'em up. We take care of family. She's asking for water, Silas. She's locked in a metal drum." "She has water," he said calmly. "She spills it. She likes to make a mess. Now step away from the door." I looked at the shotgun. I looked at the endless wall of corn. "I'm leaving," I said. "I'm going to pack my things and I'm leaving." Silas stared at me for a long time. His eyes were flat, dead things. Then slowly he nodded. "That's best," he said. "You pack up, you go. Oakhurst isn't for you." He stepped aside to let me pass. I didn't walk, I ran. I ran past him, expecting the blast of the shotgun to tear into my back. It never came. I sprinted to the cottage, threw my laptop and camera into my car and left everything else. My clothes, my books, I left it all. I peeled out of the driveway, dirt spinning, and tore down the road. I didn't stop until I was 2 counties over. I pulled into a gas station, shaking so hard I couldn't hold the nozzle. I called the FBI. I didn't call the local cops. I called the field office in Omaha. I told them everything. I told them about the silo, the voice, the padlock, the gun. They took my statement. They said they would investigate. 3 days later, an agent called me back. "Mr. Evans," the agent said, "we sent a team out to the Higgins farm." "Did you find her?" I asked, gripping the phone. "We checked the silo," he said. "It was empty. It's been used for grain storage, looks like old feed. There was no one inside, no sign of human habitation, no bucket, no lock." "That's a lie," I screamed. "I spoke to her. Silas had a gun." "Mr. Higgins was very cooperative," the agent continued, his voice patronizing. "He said you seemed very stressed lately, that you'd been talking about hearing voices in the wind. He was worried about your mental state." "He moved her," I said, tears streaming down my face. "He knew I was running. He had time." "We checked the ground, sir. There's nothing there. I suggest you get some rest." I hung up. I spent months scouring the internet, missing persons databases, cold cases. Then I found it, a digital flyer from a town 3 states away. A girl named Kayla, missing for 2 years. I zoomed in on the photo. It was a selfie. In the background, visible through a window, was a distinctive tree line, a row of crooked elms. I looked at my own photos, the artsy shots I had taken of the sunset on the Higgins farm. There on the horizon of my photo was the exact same row of crooked elms. She hadn't been missing from 3 states away. She had taken that photo at the farm. Maybe she was a previous tenant. Maybe she was a hitchhiker they picked up. I printed the photos. I sent them to the FBI. I sent them to the girl's parents. I never heard back. But last week I got a letter in the mail, no return address. The postmark was from Oakhurst, Nebraska. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was a picture of the silo. The door was open. Standing in the dark doorway was a figure. It was blurry, but I could tell it was a woman. She was waving. On the back of the photo, in shaky, spidery handwriting, Martha's handwriting, it said. She's behaving better now. We have plenty of room for one more. I moved again yesterday. I didn't leave a forwarding address, but I know they know where I am. Small towns, the roots go deep, and they stretch further than you think. There is a smell that happens when a lake dies. It's not just the smell of dead fish or rotting algae. It's the smell of history rotting. It's the scent of things that were supposed to stay buried, suddenly exposed to the air for the first time in 50 years. I grew up in a town called Crestwood, Kentucky. Our claim to fame was the Miller's Hollow Reservoir. Back in the 60s, the government built a massive dam and flooded the valley to create a water source for the county. There was a whole town down there, Miller's Hollow. Schools, churches, homes. They used eminent domain to kick everyone out, bulldoze the trees, and let the water rise. We grew up telling ghost stories about it. We'd go fishing in our John boats and look down into the murky green water, swearing we could see the church steeple or the roof of the old general store. But in the summer of 2019, the rain stopped. It was the worst drought in a century. The heat was relentless, baking the clay soil until it cracked like a broken plate. The reservoir started to recede. Day by day, the water line dropped. First, the boat docks were left hanging in the air. Then, the stumps of the old forest poked up like blackened fingers. And finally, by late August, the ruins of Miller's Hollow rose from the mud. It became a local spectacle. People came from all over to walk on the sunken town. It was eerie, foundations of houses caked in gray silt, rusted hulks of cars that had been dumped there in the 70s, streets made of slime. I was a history buff, so I was fascinated. I waited until the crowds died down. I wanted to explore the deeper parts of the hollow, the parts that had been under 80 feet of water just a few months ago. I went down on a Tuesday evening. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the basin. The air was thick and humid, smelling of sulfur and decay. I parked my truck on the old boat ramp and hiked down. The ground was treacherous, a crust of dry mud on top but soft, sucking sludge underneath. Schlop, schlop. Every step was a battle. I walked about a mile out toward where the old town square used to be. It was silent. No birds, no crickets, just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional pop of a gas bubble bursting in the mud. I found the ruins of the bank. The vault door was still there, rusted shut. I found the schoolhouse steps. It was melancholic, seeing the remnants of lives interrupted. Then I saw the house. It was further out, near the old river channel. Unlike the other ruins, which were mostly just stone foundations and rotted timber, this house was surprisingly intact. It was a brick structure, maybe a doctor's house or a wealthy merchant's. The roof had collapsed, but the walls were standing. I walked toward it, navigating around a pile of driftwood. As I got closer, I noticed something that made me stop. There was a path leading to the front door. Not a paved path, a cleared path. Someone had shoveled the mud aside to create a walkway through the sludge. I frowned, maybe other treasure hunters, but the mud on the sides of the path was fresh, wet. This had been done today. I stepped onto the porch. The wood was spongy and black with rot. The front door was missing. I peered into the gloom of the interior. "Hello," I called out. The sound died instantly, absorbed by the damp walls. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The floor was covered in a foot of muck. Debris was scattered everywhere, broken glass, a rusted tricycle, a toilet bowl lying on its side. But in the center of the living room, the mud had been cleared away. There was a dry patch of concrete floor exposed, and sitting on that dry patch was a camping chair, a modern, blue nylon camping chair. Next to it was a cooler. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a ruin. Someone was hanging out here. I approached the cooler slowly. I kicked the lid open with my boot. It was full of ice, fresh ice, and sitting on the ice were organic masses, not beer, not sandwiches. They were fish, but not whole fish. They were fish heads, hundreds of them, catfish heads, bass heads, staring up with glassy, milky eyes. I backed away. This was wrong. This was deeply wrong. Then I heard the noise. It came from beneath me. Thump, thump, thump. I froze. I looked down at the mud. There was a wooden trapdoor in the corner of the room, partially covered by a rug that was so caked in silt it blended into the floor. The thumping was coming from under the trapdoor, and then a voice, muffled, gurgling. "Help me!" It wasn't a scream. It was a wet, desperate plea. I should have run, I know that now, but instinct is a funny thing. I thought someone was hurt. I thought maybe a kid had fallen into a basement and gotten trapped. "I'm coming," I yelled. I waded through the mud to the trapdoor. There was a heavy iron ring. I grabbed it with both hands and pulled. The hinges screamed, a high-pitched shriek of metal that echoed across the empty lake bed. The door flew open. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the lake smell, it was ammonia, bleach and waste. I shone my light down into the hole. It wasn't a basement, it was a tunnel. A hand-dug tunnel, shored up with old driftwood and plastic tarps, leading deep into the earth below the lake bed. And looking up at me wasn't a trapped child. It was a man, but he didn't look right. His skin was pale, translucent like a cave salamander. He had no hair. He was wearing fishing waders that were patched with duct tape. And he was holding a spear gun. He blinked at the light, his eyes completely black, pupils blown wide. He hissed. It was an animal sound. Then from the darkness of the tunnel behind him, other faces appeared, 3 of them, gaunt, pale, eyes like saucers. They weren't stuck, they lived there. They had been living under the lake. Maybe in the old storm drains, maybe in the caves, adapting to the dark, coming up only when the water receded. I didn't have time to process the biology of it. The man with the spear gun raised his arm. THWIP. The metal spear missed my face by an inch, embedding itself in the rotting doorframe behind me with a dull thud. I scrambled back, slipping in the mud, falling on my ass. The man began to climb out of the hole. He moved like a spider, limbs splayed, climbing the slime-slicked walls with impossible speed. I scrambled up, covered in muck, and ran. I ran out of the house, onto the cleared path, and sprinted for the truck. But running in mud is the stuff of nightmares. Every step was a struggle. My boots got heavy, coated in pounds of clay. My lungs burned in the humid air. I've heard them behind me. Slap, slap, slap. Bare feet on wet mud. They were fast, they knew the terrain. I didn't look back. I focused on the distant streetlight at the boat ramp. It felt miles away. "Get him," a voice shrieked. It sounded like tearing paper. "Fresh meat, get him." They were hunting me. I reached a patch of deep silt, quicksand-like mud. I sank to my knees. I screamed, thrashing, trying to pull my legs free. I heard the hiss of another spear gun. Something grazed my shoulder, tearing through my jacket, stinging like a hornet. I threw myself forward, crawling on my stomach, swimming through the mud. I hit firmer ground and scrambled up. I was 50 yards from the truck. I fumbled for my keys. My hands were slick with slime. I dropped them. No, no, no. I fell to my knees, groping in the dark, feeling the cold sludge. Behind me, the slapping sound stopped. They were close. They were stalking now. My fingers brushed metal, the keys. I grabbed them, jumped up, and threw myself at the driver's side door. I jammed the key in. I dove inside. A hand slapped against the window. I screamed. It was a hand, but the fingers were webbed. Not biologically webbed, it was scar tissue. The fingers had been fused together, maybe intentionally, maybe from injury. The nails were black claws. A face pressed against the glass. It was the man from the hole. He smiled, revealing teeth that had been filed into points. He smashed his forehead against the glass. Crack. A spiderweb fracture bloomed on the window. I jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I threw it in reverse and floored it. The truck spun, tires screaming for traction on the gravel ramp. I felt a heavy thump as the bumper hit something, maybe one of them. I didn't stop to check. I drove. I drove doing 90 up the winding access road. I didn't stop until I hit the interstate 20 miles away. I went to the state police. I was covered in mud, bleeding from my shoulder, hysterical. They listened. They sent a cruiser out to the ramp. They found nothing. The tide had turned, not water but weather. A massive storm system had moved in that night. By the time they got there, the rain was pouring down, turning the lake bed back into soup. They never found the house. They never found the tunnel. The drought ended that week. The reservoir filled back up. Miller's Hollow is underwater again, buried under 80 feet of dark, green silence. But I know they are down there. And sometimes, when I drive over the bridge that spans the reservoir, I see bubbles rising to the surface. Big, rhythmic bubbles. And I wonder, are they just waiting for the water to drop again? Or are they working on a way to come up, even when the lake is full? I live in the desert now, Arizona, the driest place I could find. But even here, when it rains and the smell of wet earth rises from the ground, I check the locks. There is a specific kind of silence that only exists inside a blizzard. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a suffocating one. The snow absorbs sound. You can scream at the top of your lungs and the wind just swallows it whole. I've been driving a snowplow for the county for 12 years. I work the deep routes, the unpaved logging roads, and the winding passes up in the Cascades that connect the tiny mountain towns to the rest of civilization. It's a lonely job. Just you, the roar of the diesel engine, and the hypnotic swirl of white in the headlights. 2 winters ago, we got hit by the storm of the decade. Forecasters were calling for 3 feet of snow in 24 hours. My boss, a gruff old-timer named Miller, sent me out at 10:00 p.m. to keep County Road 9 clear. Road 9 is a nightmare. It's a single-lane switchback that snakes through 20 miles of dense national forest. No cell service, no houses, just trees and cliffs. The snow was coming down so hard it looked like static on a TV screen. I was crawling along at 10 miles an hour, my blades scraping the asphalt, the amber strobe lights on my roof flashing against the trees. Flash, dark, flash, dark. Around midnight, I reached the halfway point, a flat stretch known as Dead Man's Flats. I saw something in the road ahead. I slammed on the brakes. The plow skidded, fishtailing slightly before crunching to a halt. There was a car sitting in the middle of the road, a dark sedan. It wasn't buried yet, which meant it hadn't been there long, but it was dark, no lights, no engine running. I grabbed my heavy flashlight and the radio mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I got a stranded motorist on Road 9, checking it out." Static, the storm was scrambling the signal. I sighed, zipped up my parka, and climbed out of the cab. The cold hit me like a physical blow. The wind howled, stinging my exposed skin with ice pellets. I trudged through the knee-deep snow to the sedan. "Hello," I yelled, banging on the window. "You folks all right?" I shined the light inside. Empty. The car was unlocked, keys in the ignition, a purse on the passenger seat, a half-drunk cup of coffee in the cup holder. It was still warm. I shined my light around the car. There were footprints, a single set. They led away from the car, off the road, and straight into the tree line. "Hey," I shouted at the woods, "come back to the road, you'll freeze to death out there." Nothing but the wind. I had a bad feeling, a really bad feeling. People don't just walk into the woods in a blizzard, they stay with the car. I went back to the plow to try the radio again. As I climbed up, my headlights swept across the tree line. That's when I saw them. Standing at the edge of the woods, right where the footprints entered the trees, was a figure. They were standing perfectly still. They weren't wearing a coat, just a t-shirt and jeans. They were facing the woods, their back to me. "Hey," I laid on the air horn. "BLART." The figure didn't flinch. They didn't cover their ears. They didn't turn around. I jumped back out of the truck. "Buddy, get in the truck, you're gonna die." I started walking toward him. The snow was up to my thighs now. It was exhausting. As I got closer, about 20 feet away, I stopped. The man wasn't shivering. He wasn't moving at all. His skin was pale blue. "Sorry." Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. To my left, deeper in the trees, another figure, a woman, also in summer clothes, standing perfectly still, facing away from me. I swung my flashlight right. Another one, a child. There were dozens of them, scattered through the trees like statues. Men, women, children, all facing away from the road, all standing perfectly rigid. My brain tried to rationalize it. Mannequins, some kind of sick art installation. Then the man in front of me turned his head. He didn't turn his body, just his neck. Crack, crack, crack. It sounded like a branch snapping. His face was frozen, literally. Ice crystals coated his eyelashes. His eyes were milky white. His mouth was open in a silent scream packed with snow. He wasn't alive, he was a corpse, a frozen, standing corpse. And then his arm moved, jerkily, like a marionette being pulled by a novice puppeteer. He raised a finger and pointed, not at me, but behind me, toward the plow. I spun around. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat of my plow. The cabin light was on. I could see a silhouette, a large man in a heavy fur coat. He was staring down at me, his face obscured by the glare of the dash lights. He put the plow in gear. The engine roared. The massive tires began to spin, throwing up plumes of snow. No, I screamed, no. He was stealing my only way out. He was leaving me here with them. I tried to run back to the road, but the snow was too deep. It was like running in a nightmare. The plow lurched forward, but he didn't drive away. He turned the wheel. He was aiming the plow blade at me. He gunned it. The massive steel blade, capable of pushing tons of snow, came rushing toward me. I dove to the right, burying myself in a snowbank. The plow roared past, missing me by inches. The wind from its passing nearly knocked me out. The driver didn't stop. He didn't turn around. He just kept driving, disappearing down the road, the taillights fading into the whiteout. I was alone, 5 miles from anywhere, in a blizzard, with an army of frozen dead people. I lay in the snowbank, terrified to move. I watched the man, the corpse, who had pointed. He slowly lowered his arm. Then, in unison, every single figure in the woods took one step backward. Crunch. Then another. Crunch. They weren't walking. They were being dragged. Something in the dark, something deep in the woods was pulling them back, like toys on a string. I realized then that they weren't standing there because they wanted to. They were bait. They were the trap, and the man in the fur coat, he was the trapper. I didn't wait to see what was pulling them. I crawled. I crawled on my hands and knees down the center of the road, staying in the tire tracks left by the plow. I crawled for 3 miles. My fingers turned black. My nose stopped feeling the cold. I started hallucinating warmth. I wanted to lay down and sleep. But every time I slowed down, I heard it behind me. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound of stiff, frozen feet being dragged across the asphalt. A logging truck found me at 4:00 a.m. The driver said I was curled up in a ball in the middle of the lane, screaming about the Iceman. I lost 3 toes to frostbite. I lost my job because they found the plow abandoned in a ditch 10 miles away, perfectly fine, and assumed I had gone joyriding and crashed it. They never found the car. They never found the footprints. They never found the bodies in the woods. But I know what I saw, and I know why County Road 9 closes so often in the winter. It's not the snow. It's not the ice. It's because sometimes the trapper needs to restock his collection, and he prefers his statues fresh.